I watched him lose everything from the 23rd floor of a building I now owned. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the old Bradshaw Partners tower across the street. Moving trucks lined the curb. Security guards escorted former employees out with their cardboard boxes. And somewhere inside, Jack Bradshaw was learning what it felt like to have the ground disappear beneath his feet. I sipped my coffee and smiled. It had taken me 12 years to destroy him. 12 years of patience. 12 years of planning. 12 years of becoming exactly the kind of woman he never believed I could be. And now, finally, it was done. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I was 24 years old when Jack Bradshaw ruined my life. I was 36 when I returned the favor. This is the story of how I did it. The trading floor at Bradshaw Partners in 1987 smelled like cigarette smoke, expensive cologne, and desperation. 200 men in suspenders screamed into phones while monitors flickered with green numbers. The noise was deafening. The energy was electric. And I was the only woman in the room who was not carrying coffee. I had graduated summa cum laude from Wharton. I had beaten 400 applicants for one of 3 analyst positions. I had worked harder than anyone in my class, sacrificed more than anyone knew, and proven myself worthy of a seat at the table. None of that mattered. To the men of Bradshaw Partners, I was a novelty. A checkbox. Proof that they were progressive enough to hire a woman, even if they never intended to promote one. But I did not care about their intentions. I cared about results. Within 6 months, my analysis had generated more profit than analysts with twice my experience. My models predicted market movements with uncanny accuracy. My recommendations consistently outperformed every projection. The partners began to notice. The other analysts began to resent. And Jack Bradshaw began to watch. He was 44 years old. Silver hair, blue eyes, the kind of jaw that belonged on a campaign poster. He had built Bradshaw Partners from nothing, or so the legend went. In reality, he had built it from a $3 million loan from his father-in-law, but nobody mentioned that part. Jack Bradshaw was charming, magnetic, the kind of man who made you feel like the only person in the room when he looked at you. He was also married. 2 kids. A wife named Linda who organized charity galas and sat on museum boards and had no idea that her husband collected young analysts the way other men collected sports cars. I knew all of this. I knew his reputation. I knew the whispered warnings from the secretaries, the knowing looks from the older women in accounting. I thought I was different. I thought I was special. I was 24 and stupid and desperate to be seen. The affair started in December during a client dinner in Boston. Jack had insisted I attend. Said I deserved recognition for my work. Said he wanted me to meet the investors who had profited from my analysis. After dinner, after the clients had gone to bed and the hotel bar had emptied, he walked me to my room. He paused at the door. He told me I was brilliant. Told me I was beautiful. Told me I was wasted on trading floors and deserved to be a partner. And when he kissed me, I let him. I will not pretend I was innocent. I was a willing participant in my own destruction. I wanted him, his power, his attention, his validation. I wanted to believe that someone like Jack Bradshaw could see something in me that no one else had ever seen. For 8 months, we conducted our affair with military precision. Hotel rooms in cities where no one knew us. Late nights at the office after everyone else had gone. A borrowed apartment in Tribeca that belonged to one of his college friends. I learned every inch of him. The scar on his shoulder from a sailing accident. The way he laughed when I surprised him. The sounds he made when he lost control. And I learned other things too. The way he never removed his wedding ring. The way he checked his watch when we finished, already calculating how long until he needed to leave. The way he sometimes looked at me with something that might have been affection, but might have been appraisal. I told myself he loved me, that his marriage was a formality. That someday, when the children were older, when the timing was right, he would leave Linda and we would build something real. I believed every lie he told me. I believed them right up until the moment he chose someone else. Her name was Jennifer Hayes. She was 22, fresh out of Princeton, blonde where I was brunette, soft where I was sharp. The kind of woman who laughed at men's jokes and never challenged their opinions. I noticed Jack watching her the same way he had once watched me. I noticed his hand on her shoulder, lingering just a moment too long. I noticed the late nights they worked together, the business trips she was suddenly invited to attend. I said nothing. I waited. I told myself I was imagining things. But I was not imagining the night I went to the Tribeca apartment and found them together. The door was unlocked. The lights were dim. And there, in the bed where he had held me countless times, Jack Bradshaw was proving that I had never been special at all. Jennifer saw me first. Her gasp made Jack turn. And in his eyes, I saw something that shattered me more completely than any words could have. Irritation. Not guilt. Not shame. Not even surprise. Just irritation that I had complicated his evening. Sarah. His voice was calm, measured. The same tone he used when rejecting bad investment proposals. This is awkward. I could not speak, could not move, could not do anything but stare at the man I had trusted with my career, my body, my foolish heart. I think it is best if you take some time off, he continued, already reaching for his clothes. Clear your head. When you come back, we can discuss how to move forward professionally. He was managing me. Even in this moment, he was managing me like an asset that had become inconvenient. And if I do not want to come back? My voice sounded foreign. Hollow. Jack smiled. That same smile that had made me feel chosen. That same smile I now recognized as a weapon. Then I suppose we will need to discuss the circumstances of your departure. I would hate for your emotional instability to affect your future employment prospects. The threat was clear. If I made trouble, he would destroy me. He had the power, the connections, the credibility. And I had nothing but my word against his. I left without another word. 3 days later, I was fired. The official reason was poor performance, which was laughable given my track record. But Jack had spent those 3 days rewriting history, altering records, convincing partners that my success had been a result of his guidance rather than my talent. By the time I cleaned out my desk, the narrative was set. Sarah Mitchell was not a brilliant analyst who had been used and discarded. Sarah Mitchell was an unstable woman who had developed an inappropriate obsession with a married partner. The whispers followed me everywhere. Every firm I applied to had already heard some version of the story. Every contact I reached out to suddenly became unavailable. Every door that had once been open slammed shut in my face. Within 6 months, I was working as a waitress in Queens, living in a studio apartment, watching my savings disappear while Jack Bradshaw continued to build his empire. Jennifer Hayes made partner 2 years later. They were discreet about it, but everyone knew. She was his new favorite, his new project, his new weapon against anyone who dared to challenge him. I waited tables and plotted. Because here is the thing about being destroyed. It clarifies your priorities, strips away everything non-essential, leaves you with nothing but the cold, pure desire for justice or revenge. I suppose it depends on your perspective. I was patient. I had learned patience from watching markets, from analyzing trends, from understanding that the biggest gains come to those who can wait. I waited 3 years before I made my first move. His name was David Chin. He was a trader at a mid-sized firm in Chicago, one of the few people from my Wharton class who still returned my calls. He did not care about the rumors. He cared about results. I sent him my analysis. Not through any firm. Not with any name attached. Just the numbers. Just the projections. Just the proof that I still understood markets better than anyone Jack Bradshaw had ever employed. David used my analysis. He made money. He asked for more. Within a year, I was providing consulting services to half a dozen traders who had no idea that the brilliant anonymous analyst they relied on was a disgraced waitress in Queens. I built a reputation in the shadows. Made connections that had nothing to do with Jack Bradshaw's sphere of influence. And I watched. Always watched. I watched Jack expand Bradshaw Partners into real estate. I watched him leverage the firm to fund increasingly risky investments. I watched him believe his own mythology, convinced that he was too smart, too connected, too blessed by fortune to ever fail. Every empire has weaknesses. Every fortress has cracks. I spent years learning his. In 1994, I founded Mitchell Capital. Not in New York. In Chicago. Far enough from Jack's territory to avoid his attention, close enough to the markets that mattered. I used a different name at first. Built slowly. Hired carefully. Cultivated relationships with the same methodical patience I had once applied to understanding Jack Bradshaw's body. By 1997, we were managing $200 million. By 2000, it was over $1 billion. I had become, without anyone on Wall Street quite realizing it, one of the most successful fund managers in the country. And then I started buying. Not directly. Never directly. Through shell companies and overseas intermediaries, and the kind of complex financial structures that Jack himself had taught me to construct during those long nights when he thought he was grooming a mistress instead of training an enemy. I bought debt. Bradshaw Partners debt. The loans Jack had taken out to fund his expansion, secured against assets that were increasingly overvalued. I bought quietly, patiently, a piece here, a piece there. Nothing that would raise alarms, until I owned enough to matter. The crash of 2008 was not my doing. I am not powerful enough to crash global markets. But I had positioned myself to benefit from it, and more importantly, I had positioned Jack to be destroyed by it. When the markets collapsed, Bradshaw Partners was leveraged to the breaking point. And when the creditors came calling, they discovered that their largest debt holder was a company called Lakefront Holdings, which was owned by another company called Northern Trust Ventures, which was owned by Mitchell Capital, which was owned by me. I could have negotiated, could have restructured the debt, given him time to recover, allowed him to maintain some dignity in his downfall. I chose not to. I called the loans. All of them. Immediately. The legal battle lasted 18 months. Jack threw everything he had at me, every lawyer, every connection, every favor he had accumulated over 3 decades of being the golden boy of Wall Street. He tried to find out who was behind Lakefront Holdings. Tried to expose my involvement to the press. Tried to paint me as a vindictive former employee with a personal vendetta. which, of course, I was. But by then, I had become too powerful for that to matter. In March of 2010, Bradshaw Partners filed for bankruptcy. Jack lost everything. The firm, the properties, the reputation, the mythology he had spent his entire life constructing. Linda divorced him 6 months later. Took the house in Greenwich, the apartment on Park Avenue, most of what remained of his liquid assets. The children, now adults, chose to keep their distance. They had heard the stories by then. Not just about me, but about Jennifer and the women before me and the women after Jennifer. Jack Bradshaw, at 67 years old, was alone. Which brings me back to this moment. This window. This perfect view of his humiliation. He knows it is me now. I made sure of that. Last week, I sent him a letter. No signature. Just a photograph of the Tribeca apartment and a single sentence. This is awkward. I imagine he understood. Some people might call what I did excessive. Obsessive. A waste of 12 years that could have been spent building something positive instead of tearing something down. Those people have never been destroyed by someone they trusted. Never had their future stolen by a man who saw them as disposable. Never learned what it feels like to be erased. I built Mitchell Capital into a force that transformed the industry. I hired women who reminded me of myself at 24, brilliant, hungry, underestimated. I created opportunities that Jack Bradshaw would never have offered to anyone without a certain kind of pedigree. But I would be lying if I said any of that mattered as much as this moment. As watching the moving trucks. As knowing that somewhere in that building, Jack Bradshaw is realizing that the woman he threw away became the weapon of his destruction. He never saw me coming. That was his mistake. I was not supposed to survive. I was not supposed to succeed. I was certainly not supposed to become powerful enough to hold his fate in my hands. But I did. Because the thing about being underestimated is that it gives you room to maneuver. Space to grow. Time to plan. Jack Bradshaw saw a young analyst and saw an opportunity for amusement. I saw a man with an empire built on leverage and arrogance, and I saw opportunity of an entirely different kind. The coffee has grown cold in my hands. Across the street, the last moving truck pulls away. The Bradshaw Partners sign, once a symbol of everything I had wanted and lost, is lowered from the building facade. I watch it fall, and I feel nothing but satisfaction. There is a knock at my office door. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Maria, who reminds me of myself before Jack Bradshaw taught me what men were capable of. Ms. Mitchell? Your 3 o'clock is here. I turn from the window, set down my coffee, smooth my jacket, send them in. The business of building continues. There are firms to acquire, markets to analyze, a legacy to construct that will outlast both me and the man I destroyed. But for just one more moment, I allow myself to savor this. Jack Bradshaw chose Jennifer Hayes over me. He chose youth over brilliance, novelty over loyalty. He chose wrong. And I made sure he spent the rest of his life knowing it. Some lessons take 12 years to teach. Some wounds take 12 years to repay. But revenge, properly executed, is worth every single day of waiting. I learned that from the best. I learned it from Jack Bradshaw himself during all those nights when he thought he was teaching me about markets and leverage and the proper application of power. He was right about one thing. The biggest gains come to those who can wait. I waited. I planned. I won. And now, every time Jack Bradshaw closes his eyes, he will see my face. He will remember the young analyst he used and discarded. He will understand, finally, that some women do not simply disappear when you are finished with them. Some women come back. And some women burn everything you built to the ground. That is not a tragedy. That is not villainy. That is just business. The kind of business Jack Bradshaw taught me. The kind of business I perfected. The kind of business that ends with me standing at this window, watching his world collapse, feeling nothing but the pure, cold joy of a debt finally collected. He should have chosen me. He should have seen what I was capable of. But he did not. And that blindness cost him everything. I turned from the window and walked toward my next meeting. There is still work to be done. There is always work to be done. But today, just for today, the work can wait. Today, I am going to enjoy this.